and welcome to the 18th edition of the Ras Al Khaimah half marathon event. There are also 2 kilometre, 4 kilometre and 10 kilometre events, with this year over 10,000 participants already signed up to take part. The course goes around Marjan Island, but also takes in loops along the old course on the mainland, which is known for its fast times.
The RAK Half Marathon is part of the big dream that we have for Ras Al Khaimah. We're looking at tripling our number of visitors by the end of the decade by reaching to 3.5 million visitors. So it is part of that big dream. Where I want to see it, definitely bigger, most participants. Maybe by the end of the decade we celebrate 30,000 since it's at 2030. Let's see how it goes. But we go big always, and this would be maybe our target.
Well, good morning to you. It is just 6:20 a.m. here in Ras Al Khaimah, the northernmost of the 7 Emirates in the United Arab Emirates. My name's Tim Hutchings. Beside me, Paula Radcliffe, former world record holder in the marathon and 3 times world champion in the half marathon. Pat Butcher is part of our team as well here. You'll be seeing him shortly. We look forward to this 18th edition of the Ras Al Khaimah half marathon. This is an emirate that punches above its weight. It really does, particularly in half marathon racing. They've had 4 world records over the years, and there's a possibility of more this morning when the elite get underway in just 7 or 8 minutes time. There is the start line, as you can see, the same place as the finish line.
The Ras Al Khaimah half marathon began with a bang back in 2007. The very first race, Sammy Wanjiru of Kenya set a new world record. He, of course, went on to win the Olympic marathon the following year. Half a dozen years later, his colleague Mary Kaitani won half a dozen New York and London marathons, one of the big stars about 10 years ago. She then set a world record here. Her colleague, Perez Jepchirchir, the 2021 Tokyo Olympic marathon champion, she set a world record another couple of years after Mary. Finally, in 2020, exactly 5 years ago, Ababel Leshanet of Ethiopia set another world record. So 4 world records in the 18 years so far of the RAK half marathon. Now, as far as this year's race is concerned, we've got a guy coming back who finished 3rd last year, Isaiah Lasoy of Kenya. Now, there's been a bit of a tradition here of people who finish 2nd and 3rd go on to win the following year. That's exactly what happened. Daniel Mateke 2 years ago finished 2nd. Last year, he was absolutely determined to win. Right from the gun, he went out into the lead. He prevented anybody from racing past him and turned out to be a terrific winner. Excellent time, well under 59 minutes. However, the world records nowadays have tumbled. Women's is just over 62 minutes. Men's is 57 minutes and a half. But Lasoy says he's ready to do 57 minutes. So we'll wait and see. Now, on the women's side, we've got 2 great contenders, both from Ethiopia, Taye and Germawit. They've both done exactly 64 minutes and 14 seconds, which is a course record here. But Taye, much better as a track performer. If she can bring that track talent to the course this year, she's probably a marginal favourite. But we're looking for 2 fast times here in RAK 25.
Well, there's the scene. The sun will be up soon to the east of Ras Al Khaimah, where the Hajar Mountains dominate this peninsula. Paula, the course is very, very fast indeed. Dead flat, great road surface. And you and I have both been running on it over the last couple of days as we see the lineup of events coming up in the next couple of hours.
Yeah, the Ras Al Khaimah Half Marathon 2025. We've got a 5-minute warning right now. Was the old course on the mainland, which is a very, very flat loop around a couple of 5-kilometre loops, essentially a little bit around close to that, and then another 2 on the island, as you can see here. So I think you talked us around it, didn't you?
I did indeed. Just had a chance to have a good look at the course in daylight, I hasten to add, although it does look rather spectacular at night, doesn't it? So here we are sort of at ground zero, the start and finish of this 18th Ras Al Khaimah half marathon. This massive gantry is the start and finish gantry. When the runners start, they run inland, take a left after 60 metres at the first roundabout towards me, off Al Marjan Island, and then onto Al Ittihad Road, and they take a left straight down there and take a right-hand turn onto the other side of the Al Ittihad Road. Let's go and take a look. The runners will come towards us, running in the opposite direction to those cars, come up to this roundabout too, do a quick U-turn, a right-hand U-turn, and head off down there. They get to the far end, cross over the gap, and then do a second lap of it. Then they come up this avenue, do a first U-turn here on the first lap. Remember, there's 2 laps here on the island as well, and then it's a straight shot back to the finish. Beautiful view of the finish straight. There'll be big crowds here in the bleachers, roaring them on. On Saturday morning, it will not be busy. There won't be much wind. And I think this is brilliant for super fast running and record chasing.
So if we have a look at what that looks like actually on the nice graphic map, there is that left-hand turn, and then they go out along that straight road, make a quick turnabout, come back. It's 2 laps of this route, and then they will have completed just over 10k. When they come back, a bit more than 10k, isn't it? And then they head out onto the Al Marjan Island, up another turnaround, so only a few turns on this course. Sharp turns at each end, and then some good flat fast running in between, and then into the finish on the final lap.
You should have got your head around it by now. A couple of laps of that yellow loop in on the land side of the course, and then a couple of laps on the peninsula on the Al Marjan Island. That is sort of the entrance to Al Marjan Island. There's a long, almost like a causeway heading out towards the big islands built out into the middle of the sea. Temperature 13 degrees centigrade, very, very slight wind, conditions just about perfect, Paula. I mean, you know full well what is perfect for good racing. That looks pretty much spot on.
That does, and if you contrast it to last year when we had the high humidity and the fog that was enveloping the athletes, much more conducive conditions to fast racing here today, which is what we like to see. As we look down that list of past winners, course record was set by Jacob Kiplimo of Uganda back in 2022. And Isaiah Lasoya has talked about challenging that today.
Yes, indeed. And Sigrid Gessalama, the winner last year. Helen Obiri, who's become a great marathon star, of course, winning in 2023 and 2022. Gomwit Gebrizer, who is back, set that course record of 64:14. But it's like a who's who. Perez Jepchirchir, of course, who won the Olympic marathon title. She's a former winner. She won the Olympic marathon title in Japan, in Tokyo 2021. People could say Tokyo 2020, but it was 2021. I'm not quite sure why they insist on calling it Tokyo 2020. There is the lineup for this race, though, and what a star-studded field it is. Lazoy, who is on paper, is saying in the last few days, on record, is saying that he wants to break the world record today. He's going to attack it. Plenty of these fellows have broken the 60-minute barrier, several of them the 59-minute barrier. And there's 1 or 2 dark horses in there, Paula, people who have not run super fast, but we think can make an impact today.
There are, and I think they're looking to make their mark, as very often at the start of the year, come out and set their stall up for the year ahead with a good performance. Incidentally, number 20 on that list is a pacer in the women's race.
Well, it's the start should be just a minute or 2 away. We understand there is a slight delay in proceedings. They need to make sure the course is clear of traffic, of course. There's the lineup for that elite women's field, and Gomwit Gebrizer, that's a winner in 2022 in the course record. But if anything, the women's field is stronger in depth, Paula.
I think so, and an intriguing head-to-head setting it up with Ichikeyu Taya at the top there. They are actually tied on personal bests for the half marathon distance at 64:14, but Taya does have that track pedigree, and if she can translate that to racing out here as further down, number 13 there, Lemlem Hailu as well. If she can translate her track pedigree to running quickly on the road, will also be one to watch. So there's an intriguing lineup. We were told yesterday that Seom will not go. She has withdrawn with illness.
Yeah, Hailu, we saw there, W13. will be is a former world indoor champion at 3,000 meters. She won in Belgrade in 2022, and she's fabulously fast at 10,000 as well on the track, and that should translate to great half marathon running. Her actual personal best is 68.50. And I suppose in this day and age where we used to say that 70 minutes, up until about 6 or 8 years ago, we used to say anything under 70 minutes for the women is world class. Now we've brought that down a couple of minutes, haven't we? I suppose you need to say if you haven't broken 68, 38 minutes, then you're not really banging on the door of greatness.
Yeah, I mean, similar to the marathon distance, isn't it? The times have really come tumbling with the arrival of the super shoes and the increased efficiency and increased ability to train well as well. So certainly if you're knocking on that 66-minute mark, you're getting yourself right up there in contention.
Well, as you can see, the elite athletes are stripped down and ready to go. They've been warming up outside our commentary cabin here near the finish line. They've been running backwards and forwards right past our glass-fronted door to this cabin, and they are ready. It is almost chilly. When we left the hotel and walked about a mile down here, almost 2 kilometers down here, an hour or so ago, it was about 10 or 11 degrees, pretty nippy. But do you know what? At the Berlin Marathon most years, the temperature on race morning is about 8 to 10 degrees. And that's a course that's produced just a few world records over the years. They've had a few world records here as well. They know about fast running here in Ras Al Khaimah. But the weather can be different here, Paula. It's been warm on a few years. I've been here many, many times. Last year it was misty and cool and a little bit of wind. Today it looks really good.
It does look good today, and it feels good outside, doesn't it? As you were saying, there's a little bit of a crispness that you feel will help you to run fast. There's pretty much zero wind out there, and the humidity is not too high either, which is the one thing the athletes will be looking for. They don't want to be losing fluid any more than they need to. They want to be losing it by running quickly, not because of the humidity in the atmosphere.
I mean, Paula, you obviously had a well-practiced regime of taking on drinks on board during marathons. Is it as important in a half marathon to get those liquids in with the various concoctions that the athletes make up?
I think it's less important. The human body can obviously run very quickly over the half marathon distance without needing to top up glycogen stores, which is what they're trying to do in the marathon distance. So the half marathon, it really is just about making sure that you're hydrated. Some of the athletes using it as build-up for a marathon might practice drinking at speed just to be able to get that practice in. It's hard to find the opportunities to pick up a cup or a bottle at race pace and get that down you on those racing conditions. So that's why they might use that here, but they don't need to stay fueled.
When you were running at your best in half marathons, did you have bottles of your own concoction, or did you just rely upon some water on the route?
It depended if it was at home. So events like the Great North Run, they might help me out and put some bottles there to be able to practice running at race pace, grabbing your bottle, finding your bottle and getting the fluid down you at race pace. But it's not necessary. You can get by with water. If you're fueled up well at the start, I think you're fine.
Well, these athletes were all in breakfast with us about an hour and a half ago. I don't think they were having huge cooked breakfasts like one or two of us had to keep us going through this early morning start. Just to remind you, it's about, 6:33 in the morning here in Ras Al Khaimah. We're about an hour's drive across the desert from Dubai. And of course, many of the runners taking part in the mass races. By the way, there were nearly 11,000 running now. Entries were open yesterday and hundreds coming yesterday. Many of them are expats who come here to race. The number of locals who participate in sport and running in particular is going up all the time.
I think that was
Not many of them run as fast as these guys.
No, exactly. But they are looking forward to getting out and racing, as were the school children that I ran with at RAC Academy the other day. That whistle that you just heard, I think, was the couple of minutes to the start call. So they have received approval from down the course and they can start getting the race preparations underway.
The elite athletes on the start line then and ready to go for this 18th edition of the Ras Al Khaimah Half Marathon. The very first edition of this race, with international athletes in 2007. Had a world record. What will we get this morning? They are racing then here in Ras Al Khaimah. The small but very high caliber elite fields of men and women head off. They will take a left-hand turn very, very shortly onto the mainland, where they will begin that first of two huge loops. I reckon each loop is about 5.5 kilometers. They negotiate those 2 loops, and then they head on to the Marjan Island, where they do 2 loops of about 4.5 kilometers each, with that long sprint down to the finish straight and the finish line, where they have just come from, the same point as the start line. It's a carefully worked out circuit, perfectly measured to the centimetre. But for the men, Paula, I was fascinated yesterday at the technical meeting when it was announced there will be no pacemakers. The women have got a pacemaker who will take them out, we hope, at something around course record pace, if not faster. 2 of the women have, we'll talk about this shortly, 2 of the women have said they'd like to attack the world record. But in the men's race, no pacemaker, and the guys seem confident enough to not need one.
No, exactly, and straight away it is Elasoy who goes to the front. He talked about he wants to get that world record down from 57.30 it stands at now to Yomif Kajelska, and he wanted to get that down to 57 minutes and no messing around at the start, straight to the front. Maybe feels that he doesn't need a pacemaker. He can latch on to the lights perhaps of that bike up ahead, which will show them the shortest route, and has the camera man on it as well.
Well, the sky is lightening very gradually, as you can see. This big pack of elite men needs to be moving along at around 244, 245 per kilometre. That would get them to 5k in about 13:45. We'll try and give you as many splits as we possibly can, of course. But if they are really chasing the course record, which is a fabulous 57.56 by Jacob Kiplimo back in 2022, 3 years ago now, then they do need to head out at a very quick tempo. Kiplimo actually was attacking his own world record 3 years ago. He went out for the first 5k in 13:23. I mean, it was almost suicidally fast. Of course, he slowed, although he did get to 10k that morning in 26:56. I don't think they'll be that quick this morning, and I hope they're not, because that is, as I say, it's too quick. You're really not going to hang on to a pace that fast.
No, you want to be able to settle down into it, and now Elasoy is doing that. He's tracked back and allowing Dida to come through and take on that pace a little bit, just a little bit further back, slotted in that pack. Mohamed Issa is much more well known as a marathon racer, but will have the strength to come through in the closing stages if they do make any mistakes in these opening couple of kilometres by going too quickly early on. 3 minutes on the clock now, so they must have gone through, I would think, the first kilometre marker, but we're waiting for those splits to come through on our monitors. The more reliable ones will be the 5k mats. There we go, 2:57 for that first k. I would guess it might be a little bit quicker than that.
Yeah, I'd hope it's significantly quicker than that. 2:57, much slower than is necessary. We shall see, but we'll put it down for the moment. Of course, they may settle down to a more steady tempo. Perhaps that first turn slowed them a little bit as they head down along Al Ittihad Road, heading northwards actually at the moment towards Ras Al Khaimah city centre, which is about 6 or 8 kilometres away. The old course in the first few years was around the city centre, around the lagoon in the city centre, but it's been out here near the Marjan Island for quite a few years now. The visibility, of course, will get better and better, and that sky is brightening all the time, needing women here. And that's Zerai, Fator Zerai, wearing number 4, W4. She's a 66.04 runner, came third here in Ras Al Khaimah for that personal best a couple of years back, but they've split up really quickly too, Paul. I was expecting more of a pack.
Yeah, I was certainly expecting to see, this may not be the lead group of women, because we were told that there was going to be a pacemaker with that lead women. This may be a chase group, or that may be the pacemaker just behind in the back of shot, but that is Animal also going with Zere there. She has a PB from Cardiff of 67.47, and looks as though just a little bit of daylight starting to open up to Zere. As I said, we'll get back to you on whether this is the front of the women's group. There is a bigger pack of women further back, so that may well be correct, and just decided to go out very quickly.
Well, they have gone out quickly, only 5 minutes on the clock, and running alone, and no sign of the pacemaker at the moment. The women have got their own pacemaker who should be visible. It is Wasinu Admasu Abebe, who's a 29.5-minute 10K male athlete, was supposed to be pacing them, but no sign of him at the moment. Zere, well, she's done 19 half marathons. She's very experienced. 5 in 2022 and 4 last year and 4 in 2023. It's a sweet spot, so to speak. And 3 of her last 6 half marathons have been 66 minutes and bits. So she is, she knows what she's doing. She's locked in, so to speak, to that tempo, that race after race. But will she set a personal best here this morning? 66.04. Always nice to get under that next minute barrier, so to speak.
And it did look as though she had just gone through the 2-kilometre marker in the background there, and just a tad outside of 6 minutes. So from quick running from her. Incidentally, the 2-kilometre split in the men's race came in at 2:46, which is much more like it. And so settling into a rhythm and a good pack there, working together. Some looking around now as they start to take note of who has gone with this early pace and who is really looking good and feeling good, sounding good around them in that lead pack. See, they do get plenty of information from the timing car. You can see up the road ahead of them.
Well, look how quickly that daylight is increasing. 2:46 for the last kilometre for the men, so that 2nd kilometre far more like it. If that 1st kilometre was indeed 2:57, that 2nd kilometre 2:56 is really where we need it to be. Down around 2:44, 2:45 would be ideal, but at 2.5 kilometres, this is a pretty big men's pack. It's what we expected, Paula. I mean, there is so much strength in depth to both fields, but the men as well, with plenty of athletes having gone under 60 minutes. Some 10 athletes in this field having gone under 60 minutes. Most of them should be feeling very comfortable at this tempo.
They should, and that's what you like to see, is taking turns at the front now. Yegon having a go, and some changing of that lead. There isn't much wind out there, but it still is psychologically and physically that little bit harder to be the one at the front pushing the pace on. Very contrasting races on your screens there as we switch back to the women's race. There is Zere, just trying to read the name on that bib at the front.
Yeah, that camera bouncing around a fair old bit, crikey. But it's interesting, isn't it, Paul, that these two have broken away. Alamea, who I think it is, who is in the lead in the yellow, just looking.
Yeah, she does. So she was 12th in Bathurst in the World Cross Country. Does have a 66.37 personal best, which is up for revision maybe today. Their 2-kilometre split was 5:58, so they are certainly on course record pace, not too far off actual world record pace there.
.2K in 5:58, yes, super fast for that women's race. Now there's that men's pack, and we do indeed have daylight. The sun is just poking its head above the mountains over to the east. And there's, what, about 15 in this men's pack. It's good to see so many hanging in there at this quick tempo. Running 2 by 2 by the looks of things. 2:51 for that last kilometre. So if these kilometre splits are accurate, and I do put that in inverted commas, then it is a seesawing pace, and that's most unlikely on a course of this nature, Paula, as you know full well. When it's dead flat like this, good surface, very little wind about, chances are that the variation in kilometre splits will be about a second or two at the most.
Yeah, there will be that little bit of looking around as well, and perhaps a yo-yoing of the pace for a tactical reason rather than because of the wind in their faces. We'll get more of an indication of the time, as I say, when they go over those 5 kilometre mats, which are a little bit more reliable for the splits. But certainly there is a big pack there, and that will mean that they start looking around, start seeing who's there, and start thinking about where they might make a move to try and win the race in the latter section of this race, rather than going out alone to chase fast times. That is a 10 kilometre mark,
That's
isn't it, for the
10k
next
marker
time
which they'll
round?
pass on the second lap. That marker is actually just almost an identical point to the 5k marker. Remember, this is a 5.5 kilometre lap, so that 10k marker, well, they've just passed 4k just before that 10k marker, so they've now gone through 4k. They say 3.9k, but according to the map, they should have gone through 4k. There it is, about 11:26 at 4k. Come on, Paula, what does that mean? Come on, how's your maths going? That's 34 seconds divided by 4. What are we, 8? So
You're thinking about that now,
Eh?
You're thinking about that now. If it was
But,
3 minutes, it'd be 12
that means
minutes.
they're averaging
Just take
252.
it,
That means they're averaging 252.
Yeah, you can see it's slowed down because you saw they're actually struggling to all fit on the expanse of tarmac that they've got to race on, and settling into that yellow hard shoulder marker almost as if it was the blue line. And Dida now had enough and decided, okay, now that's enough looking around, we're letting the fast times slip away, so we need to start working together perhaps a little bit and certainly start to push the pace on. Big contrast to the women's race, which, as we've said, has gone out at a very good pace. Now
The thing is, that for elite athletes of this caliber, chasing super fast times, and you're almost redlining the whole time. I mean, that 254, if it's true, it's just nowhere near what's needed. And not sure I'm entirely believing these splits. They are moving well. There's been very little discernible variation in tempo. They're probably moving somewhere around 250 per kilometre, maybe slightly quicker than that. Predicted race time, you see 60:26. They need to be going 2 minutes quicker than that as a predicted race time. So each K needs to be quite a few seconds quicker than that.
Yeah, and that's why you can see it's difficult physically when the pace concertina's like that, and you see the pack bunch up as it's starting to do again now. That was a short-lived burst at the front from Dida, and it's not really done any damage, but it is draining systemically to have to pick the pace up and then settle back down again, pick up again. It makes it a tougher way to run than running even effort and getting a quicker time.
Now, 3 years ago, Jacob Kiplimo had sailed through 5k long ago, whereas here they are, well, they're not going to be around, they're going to be around 14 minutes, something like that at 5k, it would seem this morning. I hope there's not any wind out there that's come up with the sun. That would be disappointing. But also the fact that they're spread 4 or 5 across would suggest they're not running into any wind, Paula. You always get, it's always a really clear indicator, isn't it? Athletes running into a wind will tend to slipstream, get in behind each other. There's 5k. And 14:15 on the clock. Wow. That is on the slow side, we have to say. A little bit disappointing. We're hoping it would be some 20 or 30 seconds quicker than that. I must admit, in sympathy to the athletes themselves, I was never a great morning runner. Training, never mind about racing. I don't know about you. I mean, did you get used to those early morning starts?
I mean, I think you have to, don't you? And your brain certainly recognises that while it might not like training early morning, when it's race day and it's time to get up and get going, then that's what you need to be doing. And incidentally, the women are not too far behind, about 45 seconds behind the men, I reckon, heading towards 5k around about that 15-minute mark in time. So they have certainly set out with intent, and there is course record holder Gerbazia has worked her way back up to join that leading pair of Zere and Alamarejo. Muradi is not the pacemaker that we had down, but is doing a good job at working together with these women. So that is 15:29 on the clock for them, and they've slowed down a little bit through, although on my computer it has come up 14:57 through 5 kilometers. That
Well, 14:57 at 5k is actually quicker than Guide ran in her world record in Valencia back in 2021, in October 21. She went through 5k in 15 minutes. So this is super fast in the women's race. What a contrast to the men's, who've gone up much slower than we expected. But there's a confidence to the women, Paula, that is quite unusual. Two of them having gone on record before the races saying they want to attack the world record this morning. Neither of them have broken 64 minutes, and yet they're chasing a time under 63 minutes.
And Taya is not actually in that lead group at the moment either. So she was one of the women who talked about going after that record, and is not one of the 3 women on pace at the moment in this race. Now, what are the men up to as they approach the turn at this end of the course? And now we'll head around that roundabout and back out on to the final one of the loops on the mainland.
Yeah, this is the athletes negotiating the roundabout near the start. Oh, and there was a faller there. Somebody's gone down. It's such a big pack, and they're negotiating a turn there. That's really awkward. Couldn't see who went down. He got up pretty quickly, but that takes the stuffing out of you. I don't think I ever fell in a road race before. I fell once or twice in track races. It had always really, some people just sort of get a roll, like a judo roll, get up and get running again very quickly. Doesn't affect them much. It absolutely took the wind out of me.
Yeah, I think particularly, even if you just get knocked or get an elbow, it can take the wind out of you, but certainly to go down and get a look and see what happened here.
So their topper picture, just out of the topper picture, the start-finish line has disappeared. So this is the third roundabout in effect. The first one they hit near the beginning of the race, and then well into these first few kilometres, it's the third roundabout they negotiate, and they're heading back out now, just starting the second big lap on the inland portion of the course. They are beginning to motor now. I just sense maybe a little bit of urgency there. I don't know if somebody's had a shout at them, Paula, or what, but they are moving well at the front end.
Yeah,
maybe the fact it's such a big pack is a suggestion, that an indication that they are not moving as quick as they should be. That's looking a bit too comfortable.
Exactly. When you look around, you see there are a few too many men for comfort there. That is an incentive to push the pace on a little bit. Also can mean that there starts to be a bit of looking around, and everybody's waiting for somebody else to take on those duties of getting the pace moving. And see almost a wall of men across the road, and that will become a little bit more tricky, as we saw when they get to the far end of this loop and the road narrows down a little bit. It is a very, very big group at the moment.
Now this is, I must admit, I was really surprised yesterday at the technical meeting, 5 o'clock last night at the Athletes Hotel in the conference centre, when they said there were no pacemakers for the men's race. And I fear that what we're seeing is the result of there being no pacemakers, because the pacemakers would have been told, right, you need to go out at 2:45 per kilometre, and they would have laid that down. Now, if the athletes hadn't gone with that tempo, pacemakers would have slowed a little bit, regained contact, and then gradually picked it up again. But they'd have dragged the pace down towards target speed in the first few kilometres at some point. Whereas it seems so far, Paula, look at that, at 2:56, they're just nowhere near the tempo that we anticipated, and it is a great shame. Maybe it's a little bit too cool for them, maybe it's too early in the morning, I'm not sure, but nobody in this pack has really gone out even close to being aggressive enough.
No, they're certainly saving racing, I think, perhaps for the second part of the race at the moment, and that's dangerous. Although towards the back of the pack, it does look like some of the men are working hard to stay with the the pace, and you can see Lassoy now back to the front again. It is a yo-yoing of pace, which, as we've said, can make it a tough way to race, even if that's not reflected in the actual time on paper at the end of the run. Now, what's happening in the women's race is that back to Taya. Perhaps this is the lead, and we haven't been shown the lead in the women's race, which would make more sense because the times through that 5 kilometre did not tally up early on. So I wonder if Taya with Wasanu, who was down as the lead pace.
Well, Taya here, wearing W1. 24-year-old with a best of 64.40. She's a bronze medalist. World Championships over 10,000 metres in Budapest a couple of years ago in Hungary, where it was sweltering hot. Could hardly be different conditions this morning. That in what, about 20:57, something like that. 20:57. And if we extrapolate from that to what the likely closing time will be.
Good. Official timekeepers came up with 20:58, so we'll give you a golden star for that one.
That is fast.
Very Jimmy. And we've worked out that's going to give you round about 60. So that quick. She's about on her personal best at the moment, and looking strong. She's got some company, but kind of has the race wrapped up at this point.
Well, she's on schedule to run something like 63:15. If she can maintain that tempo, we would see what, perhaps the second fastest time in history this morning. Early days to be saying that. Now this side-on shot in the men's race really makes it look like they are motoring. That's Lazoy, centre of picture. Tata, the side of him who is holding the lead position at the moment. And Matata, funnily enough, well, he's a 59.37 performer. That was winning in Padua in April last year. He won 4 of his 5 half marathons in 2024. He was second in Delhi last October, 9:50. He's a rare athlete under 60. But here again, when he widen out, all of a sudden it's 15 more in this. That just tells me it's been too gentle so far. 22 minutes on the clock. They're way past the third distance, and Paula, it's looking too comfortable.
Yeah, it still hasn't really got moving here. We see the odd man and push the pace on for a short time, not long enough to do any damage to that pack. Even the couple of men at the back of that, a little bit of difficulty for a little while, and then they're able to get onto the pack. And Constantina's again, as we're seeing now, and that, as I said, it does do a little bit of damage to the men in that group, but not too much. And what it does do is make it harder to react then when the pedal really does go to the floor, and when a really strong move does get made in this race later on. I can see this pack suddenly react and struggling to do that. See.
Well, there is that 8th kilometre at 2:52. I got them at 22:52 at 8k. That's an average of 2:51 per kilometre, and we were hoping that they'd be down there in the mid 240s, so they are still not hitting their straps in terms of the tempo. It looks like they were, but they're just not going quick enough. 1 or 2 athletes beginning to peel off extreme right to picture, which indicates we're just over 8 kilometres done, that 1 or 2 athletes are feeling the strain, but they are moving at something like 60-minute tempo. But
are you sure? Are you ready?
that's no they want
to one and all.
Now this is the mass getting ready to away.
Well, we think there are 1,000 in that marathon that due off at 7 p.m. and they are very careful with that, so that the get involved or cross over the mass runners. Of course, the elite athletes are out on their second lap on the inland loop when they get onto the island, Marjan Island, and negotiate those 2 laps on the island. These mass runners will be way behind. They'll start bang on time. Away they go then at exactly 7 a.m. Joggers in the front rank. Always It puzzles me why somebody who's an absolute slow jogger would want to be anywhere near the front, but whatever. Doesn't matter. There's a lot of good club runners there. A lot of expats have come across from Dubai. Dozens. Up dramatically, Paula. Last year, in total races, the Portuguese were over 5,000 here. It's more or less doubled in size.
Which is brilliant to see. Great to see many youngsters getting out shorter distances as well. They have a 2K and a 4K race. They're watching.
Independent splits, he's in the lead vehicle, and only the, but here this men's pack 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 15 strong, and that's for me probably the clearest indication that they're just not going fast enough. There shouldn't be 15 men there cruising along outside 60-minute tempo if they were really pushing it at the front end. And the absence of a pacemaker is becoming a rather glaring absence.
Yeah.
Because they're not at 10K yet, and they are way, way outside the tempo that we wanted them to be running at. And that has been maintained for each of the last few years at this race. The 9th K at 2:48, I don't know if somebody's had a yell at them or what, but even that is outside the 2:45 tempo that was predicted for these athletes.
They did pick up through that 9th K. It looks as though, from the picture and from the way that they're bunching again, that perhaps it's steadied down also, and as you say, we're going to see certain negative splits, I think, in this race, and a huge amount of fast racing going on over the second half of this race today. Quick update on the women. They are still, or Taya certainly is still, knocking off those kilometres around about the 3 minutes. Only a couple of them are slowed to outside 3-minute pace, and the average is working out very much on that 3-minute pace, which is very, very quick racing on the women's side.
Well, they're approaching 10K, as you can see, a couple hundred metres from 10K, and they will get a shock, I think, many of these fellas, when they see the time. There is a timing car in front of them. They should be able to see the time, but gloves being worn by one or two, perhaps an indication of why they're not moving as fast as we would like. Matata there, wearing those pink gloves. It is about 11 or 12 degrees out there, pretty cold. But there it is, the 10K mark passed in about 28:34. Way, way outside what we were hoping. And Lazoy is leading that pack for Matata, Kipkoech, Hillary Kipkoech, Deriba, Dida. Hard to identify the whole pack from these sort of shots. And they are moving well, they're just not moving as quick as we expected. And Ras Al Khaimah is a race that over the years has, approaching 2 decades, has built a reputation for super fast, aggressive running. Mozinu Paula.
Yeah, he's doing a good job and pacing the lead of the women's race in Taya, who has gone out extremely quickly, as we've said, and also metronomic and smart in the way that she is running. She's running very fast, but she's not taking huge risks with that. Some signs of fatigue, I guess, starting to creep in now as those kilometres now clicking by just outside of 3 minutes instead of just on it or under it as she was doing, but still phenomenally fast racing. And you can see behind her, although there is a little bit of a gap starting to open up to the pacer ahead of her, there she's not in any danger of being caught by the chase group of women at the moment.
Are you surprised that there's not more athletes with her. Certainly, I mean, I know she's gone out incredibly quickly. 14:57 is world record time, but there's 10K. So what, 30:05, give or take a second or two at 10K. Now, in her world record, Guide at 10K was 29:45. She went out in 15 for the first 5K, then blasted a 14:45 for the second 5K. So she's some 20 seconds down on Guide. And there it is, 30:06, the official blocking at 10K. So she's done the opposite to Guide.
We just lost about maybe 5, 6, 7, 8 seconds there. She went to pick up a bottle, bent down to pick the one on the floor that the pacer had actually dropped, and then realised that wasn't the one she wanted either, so went back. So a huge amount of time lost there at that drink station, which was unfortunate, but also perhaps indicates that she is really starting to fatigue, because she certainly wanted to be able to get her personal bottle at that station, and not sure she was able to do that. Now looks as though she's back into good running though.
Well, she's moving well, but yeah, you're right. There she is, chatting to the pacemaker there. That's one of the advantages of having somebody from your home nation chatting away in Amharic and getting back into the rhythm. But she's got to put that behind her. You know, I guess experienced athletes, when you have a little hiccup or something goes wrong in a race, you mustn't let it dwell in your mind. You have to just get on with it. And you've experienced that.
Yeah, I mean, and as we talked about, it's less crucial over the half marathon distance than in the marathon itself. Here we'll get a look at perhaps at what happens. She goes, certainly was approaching the drinks bottle. I think that's her bottle on the table. She thinks it's the one on the floor. She goes back down, then realizes, no, that's not the right one. Goes back again and does get a bottle, but then is not running with one later on. Is she running with one at that point? I think she just decides at that point there's no point worrying about it. But although the time has been lost to that point, so I'm not really sure what she was looking for at that table. But
you have to say though that, you know, racing, while it might be a sort of such a raw physical thing, you have to be able to think on your feet as well. You know, you have to be sort of cerebral enough. And that wasn't brilliant thinking from her just there, stopping, glancing at bottles. I mean, just get running. As you said, she lost 5, 6, 7 seconds, maybe more there. She lost her rhythm. That could have been the difference between a course record and not a course record, or a world record and not a world record. Now, it doesn't look like the world record is on, but the course record is vulnerable.
Yes.
64:14. And that could have made the difference. That could have made a big difference. So she's lost a lot of ground there.
This is the chase duo. We think chasing behind that is, well, that says Jessica Ranga, but that's not what it says on her bib. That is Zaray running there with Alamaru, we think, don't we?
Yeah, Alamayehu. So it's W4 and W7. Zaray there to the right in the purple strip. She's that 66:04 performer who was third here a couple of years back. Never run on the track. But she's been incredibly consistent at the half marathon, and Alamayehu was 8th here last year, but obviously hoping for a much higher position this year, and hopefully a quick time as well. Her personal best 66:37, as we see the massed field heading out on the first inland circuit. That's a lovely sight, isn't it?
And from that shot you get an idea of just how this course can produce as many fast times as it does. If you're worried about hills, then you don't need to worry about that here today, do you?
No hills.
Absolutely don't. And as we said, very little wind out there, and so that's useful given that there's not much shelter either.
Well, it's as you can see, there's traffic moving there. The course is very carefully worked out with lines of barriers so that traffic is not compromised on the inland side of the course, or indeed on the Marjan Island. The traffic is able to keep flowing on the island and on the inland part of the course, despite the runners taking up half the road. It's very, very cleverly done. Here they are, 34.5 minutes on the clock, and they are about to head into the onto the island itself now, these athletes. But have they blown the chance of course record? And actually, the way it's been unfolding, even breaking 60 minutes this morning, that's looking questionable with the very, very cautious first half of this race. 2:50, 2:51. There are very consistent splits coming through. Look, they're top left of your screen, but it's nowhere near fast enough for anything approaching the course record.
No, there's still a huge amount of looking around at each other and waiting for somebody else to start to make the move. There have been a few goes at the front, as we talked about, but not really enough sustained work to get this race really going. And now, as there is a change of scenery and they head out onto Al Marjan Island, they're just actually coming through in front of our booth, so we get a in real life look at them, and that pack certainly now is starting to fragment and break up, and stragglers are struggling to hang on to the back. Meanwhile, in the women's race, that was by far the slowest kilometre. To 11 kilometres came in at 3:14. That was accounting for the going back for the drinks bottle, so we'll get a better indication a little bit further on. Here is Judy Kemboy.
Kemboy isolated, and this is one of those situations where some athletes have a pacemaker and others don't, and of course some people, and I have to admit I'm probably amongst them, think it's an unusual situation when you get what's supposed to be a race unfolding, and yet one athlete gets help out in front. The athletes in second and third, who are chasing hard, don't get that same help. But here's Kemboy working really hard, the 25-year-old. She's won 4 of her 5 half marathons last year. She's currently back in second place, 36 minutes on the clock, and she's moving really well, Paula.
She is. She looks as though she's really stretching out now and can see what we can't see up the road ahead of her in terms of where she's chasing for and who she's working towards. She's also looking at her watch there and checking her own splits, and looks as though she's certainly trying to chase down that lead. Just how far it is ahead of her, we're not really getting any indication of on the splits, and that 12th kilometre has now come in for Taye at 3:06. So a little bit of a slowing, as we talked about, started to fatigue in that race, but now has managed to pick it back up from the time that she lost approaching the 10-kilometre marker.
Well, Taye, Kemboy rather, won 9 of her 12 races last year. Back to the leader, Taye here, who is hanging on closely to the coattails of her pacemaker. And those splits, if that 11th kilometre was the 3:14, that 8-second differential is all down to that drink station mishap that we saw a few minutes ago. She is still moving well, and she's onto the island now as well, the Al Marjan Island, as we see this men's pack, which is what, Paula, narrowed down to about 10 athletes, but it's still very tightly bunched, and you get the impression there's and it's not a bad thing, a great race unfolding as opposed to a really fast chasing of quick time.
Exactly, and we've been treated to 2 very different scenarios, aren't we? Chasing the time in the women's race, and on the men's side of that final split, as you've just pointed out, 3:13 kilometres is down to 2:47, but it's still a little bit of a yo-yoing, and it's much more of an intriguing race being set up there, and people just now deciding, okay, I'm going to leave it now and see who can finish the fastest.
That 13th kilometre, by the way, 2:47, is the fastest kilometre of the race, and we were hoping they'd go out at 2:45 tempo. Maybe we were expecting too much. These are human beings after all, they're not machines. The predicted race time is gradually coming down, almost dead on 60 minutes now. The lead athletes coming past our commentary position, in fact, here on Al Marjan Island. But this pack now, with halfway way behind them, watching each other maybe more than chasing quick times. I'm sure we will see a sub-60-minute winning time, but nowhere near as quick as we had hoped. Matata still at the front. Alex Nzioka Matata, the 26-year-old, is a best of 59:37. Won 4 of his 5 half marathons last year. A super racer, and he might just be delighted that it's gone relatively slowly and this has become a real race. Now, of course, the benefit of that, the positive thing about it, Paula, is that over the last 5K or so, we should get a real ding-dong battle.
Definitely, there is certainly some fresh legs left in that group, and we will see some really exciting racing coming out over these 2 laps on Al Marjan Island. And back to the women's race, Taye, I reckon she had a fairly substantial lead. I was trying to gauge as they went past in front of the cabin. I think it's over 30 seconds, perhaps a 45-second lead. Back to Kemboy, who is chasing hard though, and that distance between Judy Kemboy, and Zere behind her is growing with every stride at the moment. Contrast that to the fatigue that's starting to creep into the legs of Taye, who's lost another second there between 12k and 13k, starting to slow down and see that course record that she was aiming for start to slip away a little bit. She needs to try and focus on the back of the pacemaker ahead of her, as you said, Tim.
Well, 40 minutes on the clock then for the athletes in this 18th edition of the Ras Al Khaimah half marathon. Taye still being dragged along by this pacemaker. 3:07 that last kilometre. Remember, her first 2 kilometres were under 3 minutes. She went through 2k in 5:58, 5k in 14:57. She was averaging sub 3 minutes for the first 5k. And at 10k 30:06, she was averaging almost exactly 3 minutes per kilometre. So she has slowed a little bit, but she could still be heading for a super fast time in the women's race, even though she's on her own. And what a contrast, Paula, to this picture where you've got a pack of men, but at a relatively slow tempo.
And they still are just looking around, aren't they? Matata has been there for a little bit. Lasoy has been there from the beginning, taking his turn at the front. We have seen Kip Koech also do that a couple of times, but nobody has really yet gone to the front and kept their foot down hard. And I still think there's a little bit of testing out going on amongst this group of men. They'll take a turn just to see what everybody else has left in their tank, and then just back off again. It has now, for the first time, predicted race time slipped below the 1 hour mark.
Yeah, that's good to see. The urgency perhaps getting into these fellas' legs, although they are on the first of 2 laps, and I reckon each of those laps is about 4.5 kilometres on the Marjan Island, so they're on the first of these 2 laps. There's that turnaround at the northernmost point of the Marjan Island loop. They've got to head back now towards the start-finish area, where they will take another U-turn and come back out to this point, and then they'll be on the run-in towards the finish. It has thinned out. There's, what, about 8 or 9 now in this lead pack. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think about 8 of them by the looks of things. And it will be fascinating to see what sort of splits they can generate through these last few kilometres, Paula. But the chance of super fast times this morning has gone. That 19k marker they'll be passing in about 4.5k's time.
Yeah, that'll be the next time around, and then the race will really be on at that point. And as we've talked about, I think this next 5 kilometres or so is going to be one of the quicker splits of the race, because certainly they've saved their racing until they got out onto this point.
Well, as you can see from those aerial shots just now, much of the Marjan Island is under development. There's huge amounts of construction going. Lazoy 42.33 at 15k, 42.33, and so they are heading for something just down below the 1 hour mark. But it was nowhere near what we hoped. Indeed, when the course record was set by Kip Limo, went for 15k in 40.43, so he was 1 minute and 50 quicker than these fellas here today.
And I think the way that they're racing now, they will make some inroads on that, but impossible to make up that much time in what is left of this race. Now, what, 6 kilometres or so.
Well, 42.33, they are heading for something like 59.40, 59.45. That last kilometre of 2.48, so at last they are now beginning to click into the 2.40s. But far too many of the first 10, 12 kilometres were in the low 2.50s, and they were losing many seconds every kilometre.
Indeed, what's done the damage was the 14th kilometre. They went through in 2.43 for that K, you can see coming up on the side of the screen, and that is what caused that pack to whittle down to the 8 men that we see in there at the moment.
Yeah, 2.48, 2.43 and 2.48 the last couple of kilometres. The 14th and 15th kilometres. Back to Taye, though, in glorious isolation with that pacemaker, who is dragging her, we hope here, to at least a new course record. She still looks strong.
She is, but she's certainly slowing. That was a 3:10 through the 14th kilometre. You can see the pacemaker looking back to her. I think she's really starting to feel that early pace and struggling to maintain that at this point. And now the bigger question is, what is the pace of Judy Kemboy chasing hard in second? And this turnabout point will give Taya the opportunity to look back and see now on the other side of the road Judy Kemboy chasing, and will also vice versa give that encouragement to Kemboy if she can see, because she will see the motorbike as well and the entourage around Taya. I still haven't seen them on the other side of the road yet, though, although difficult to from that shot.
Here she is. Here is Kemboy. Long, raking stride she's got. Had a superb 2024. Back in the autumn, she was third in Brasov over 10 kilometers in 30:29. She won 2 of her road 10Ks last year. She's got plenty of speed. 15K marker there, 45:52 unofficially. And that compares within the world record 44:29. So she's, well, some minute and 20 seconds outside the tempo laid down by Gide in her world record. The event record, 15K, was passed in 45:51, so she's almost identical to the split of Gebreseer back in 2022, 3 years ago, when she went through 15K in 45:51. We got 45:52 here this morning. It's near as, damn it, absolutely the same. And I wonder whether she's got the legs on her, Paula, because actually Gebreseer did finish really strongly, didn't she? She actually beat Helena Beeri over those last few kilometres.
Yeah, and there we do get an idea of this. So the gap is still 44 seconds back to Kemboy, and I agree, Tim. I think it's contrasting ways of getting to that time at this point in the race, and it's been a tougher way that Taya's done it by going out as fast as she did early on in this race, and it's going to be hard racing for her now to A, maintain that lead, but B, to keep that course record within her sights and personal best for her as well.
Kemboy here working all on her own, getting plenty of liquids on board, still moving really well. She's got lovely long raking stride. She's a rangy runner. I love the way she moves. Here's Taya, who is far more high-kneed, although that stride length has gone, hasn't it? There's definitely a reduction in the power of each of those strides as the pacemaker glances across at her. I think they're still communicating with each other. He's trying to egg her on here, urge her on.
Yeah,
she will need to run a stunning last 5K to get down towards course record.
Well, she's going to have to dig really deep, and if you contrast the style to that we're used to seeing when she's racing, and she's racing well on the track, she certainly is fatigued out there, so it's going to be a hard battle now. And in the men's race, it's still trading blows, isn't it, really, here, with different men having a go at the front. Back to Matata now, who's put his foot down and is starting to ask some questions of the men in that lead group and string them out a bit.
17K then, in about 48:15. And there's 9 athletes in this group now. Matata pushing on really strongly, Lazoy going with him. Lazoy is one of the pair who said that he was chasing the world record today. He is the fastest in the race, Lazoy. Should be very comfortable with this tempo. There's still only a few clicks inside 60-minute pace, and Lazoy has run 58:10. He is one of the fastest men in history. He was the world number 4 last year with that 58:10 when he was 3rd in Copenhagen. And he looks comfortable here, doesn't he? Lazoy in second, just mirroring every move made by Matata, responding here to the lead of Matata rather than taking the initiative. That is, those splits varying a fair old bit, Paul, at 243, 248, 250. A small variation can be explained by the U-turns, of course.
A little bit, and I think there is concerted effort now going on by Matata as well, so I'm intrigued to see what the next split will be as it comes up for, well, it's not the 17 kilometre yet up on our screens, on our computers. It's actually come up at 2:51. It does look as though it is a quicker move being laid down, and certainly for a while Lazoy was eyes focused on the back of Matata, just trying to go with that and then stay with it. Also from that shot there, it looks as though that group has whittled down. There are almost 5 getting away. The 6th man is trying to hang on.
Well, I think Matata has injected a little bit of pace, and that has split up the group. It was 9, quite closely packed, and now you can see right in the centre of picture, what, about 5 or 6 together, 2 or 3 tailing off to right of picture, and that at last has broken up the pack that for the last, well, 10 kilometres or so has looked far too comfortable and cosy. As they pass the DoubleTree by Hilton Hotel, there's been the most wonderful home to these athletes over the last few days. At the back, there's a man-made beach. It's a glorious little retreat for a few days away in the sun. The athletes, of course, more focused upon their task of this morning. And there are those splits, consistent splits, Paul, of the last 3K, but just not quick enough.
Yeah, there's just not really been the real coming alive of the pace here, but what we have seen is, as we've said, a yo-yoing, a testing out, and a gradual whittling down of the men at the front and trying to sort it out and sift it out into the men contenders. So we still have Matata there, we still have Lesoy, we have Debele is in there, I think we have Milak.
Dida is there as well, yeah. They've just gone past 18k, so 3 kilometres to go. At the speed these fellas are moving at, that's about not much more than 8 minutes of running. But they are watching each other. This has become almost middle distance race-like, and there's plenty of energy in some of those pairs of legs. Plenty of these races are got great track 10Ks capability as well, as we see to the right of picture. Taye with her pacemaker. Now the lead she had over Kemboy at 15k was 44 seconds. That was about 6 minutes ago. I wonder if Kemboy will be closing on her as she negotiates that turn.
I think certainly from the visuals of the two women, it does look as though Kemboy is moving stronger. And if I tell you that for the last kilometre for Taye it was a 3:19, visually Kemboy is moving quicker than that now. So how many inroads has she made into that 44-second lead that was held?
Well, that the variation there, 3:09 and 3:19, that, unless there was that's because of one of the turns or something, that suggests a massive slowing on the part of Ejgayahu Taye of Ethiopia, the 24-year-old. Kemboy, just a year older, who is got to be given a lot of respect. 65.43, her best was second in Copenhagen last September. She is a relative newcomer to the roads. The first results for her were last year, Kemboy. She's not a familiar face for very long on the international road racing circuit. This pack, getting to motor well. Debele looking strong there, the tallest of this group. He was 11, very strong year on the roads last year. He was 6th in the Valencia Marathon back on December the 12th in 2:04. So he's got plenty of strength. Look at that 18th K, Paul. Are we to believe that at 2:40?
Well, I think so, given how cautiously they went off and how much they've kept for these closing stages. So, I mean, I think that's substantially quick running and reflected in the visuals again, as you see there, because that group has now broken down again, and it looks like 4 men making their way away from the 2, trying to hang on to the back of that group, and it's quick racing, and it's maybe going to get even quicker now.
Well, they're approaching 19k. There's the 19k mark of 53.47. 53.46, we'll call it, at 19k. And they are motoring, racing on the run-in now. They're on the final stretch towards the finish line. About 2k to go for this pack in this 18th edition of the Ras Al Khaimah Half Marathon. 4 together. The 2 others have had to let go. Matata, to his credit, has been the man who over the last 10 minutes has done most of the pushing, Paula.
He has.
Lesoy tucked in behind him. Dida tucked in. Debele is there as well.
Yeah, Debele looks as though at this stage he is really hanging on, but Matata is certainly the one turning the screw and asking all the questions, and the others are really just trying to hang on at the moment. Are they trying to keep something in reserve for that final straight, that final finish? Because certainly Matata has put a lot of this hard work in, and is probably hoping somebody might come along and help him out a little bit at the front.
Well, I think at this stage, you just get your head down and try and eke it out. And it's a lot of it is about racing now, racing smarts, isn't it? Look at that last kilometre at 2:47. It's very impressive, but it's all too late in terms of super fast times today here in Ras Al Khaimah. But let's focus on this brilliant race that's unfolding. Lazoy on the near side, nearest the camera there, up on his toes. Looks like he's in a 1,500 metre race. The way he's moving, the way that his body is shifting across the ground. Matata with that rather bizarrely one pink glove now on his right hand, doing the work. He's there to be shot down, but what you've got to tell yourself in this situation, Paul, and you'll have been in this situation many times, is you've got to tell yourself, if you're in the front and others are hanging on to you, they are hanging on. You know,
Yeah.
they're not biding their time. You've got to say to yourself, I'm hurting them, I'm hurting them.
You have to say that, you have to repeat that. It might be hurting me, but it's hurting them more than it's hurting me, and that's certainly what he will be trying to send through his mind. And if you're the man trying to hang on, you just have to be telling yourself, hold on, hold on, hold on. Maybe there will be a sign of slowing, a sign of weakness further on, but it doesn't look that way. And another check of his watch for Matata, if he can't feel what's happening around him, he can sense that he's whittling that group down now. De Baila has not managed to stay with this, and it is only Lasoy and Dida managing to hang on to the coattails at the moment.
Matata leading. Not much more than a kilometre to go. Matata leading from Lazoy then here in Ras Al Khaimah, and Dida has had to let go as well. He's back. Matata at 20k, 56.23. And he's earned this one, he's worked for it, and he might yet have broken Lazoy. Lazoy there, that little psychological elastic band between these pair is being stretched to the max, is being stretched to the point where it's going to snap surely. And Alex Nzioka Matata, the 26-year-old winner of Padua in April last year, won 4 of his 5 half marathons in 2024, could have broken this field. The power, the cadence is fantastic here, as he can pretty much see the finish line now dead ahead of him. About 600 or 800 meters to run. He hasn't had, was that a little glance over his shoulder? Yeah, a little look over his left shoulder and then his right shoulder. Bizarrely, a check of his watch, Paula.
Yeah, I think just checking with his splits, he's looking ahead, to eyes focused on that finish line ahead. The look over his shoulder is just to check what has happened to Lasoy, but I think you're right, that elastic just snapped there. Lasoy was hanging on and trying to hold on, but Matata rewarded for what's been a couple of kilometres, 2-3 kilometres of really, really hard, sustained work.
He has broken them. Look at the gap. Back to Lazoy there, left of picture. It's probably about 30-35 metres. And Alex Nzioka Matata from Kenya is surely heading for victory in this 18th edition of the Ras Al Khaimah Half Marathon. He ran a very fast road 10k in July last year. It was 28:01. Now that might not sound super fast, but get this. It was at about 6,500 feet up in Kaptagat in Kenya. It was at altitude in July last year. He was only 4th in that race, but that 10,000 metre speed and strength coming very much to the fore here in what has been, by the standards of these men, a tactical half marathon here in Ras Al Khaimah this morning. The finish line is in sight. The finish line approaches. Alex Matata driving for the line. The battle behind goes on for the minor places. Lazoy, the pre-race favourite, the fastest in the field, is in 2nd place. But watch the clock. They have clawed back a lot of time over the last few minutes with these fabulous splits over the last few kilometres. 2:40 for the 18th kilometre, 2:47 for the 19th, 2:42 for the 20th kilometre. And Matata here, coming towards the line. It's going to be outside 59 minutes, but a long way under the 60-minute barrier, as Matata here is heading for a huge new personal best, and more importantly, a win in Ras Al Khaimah 2025. There it is, 59:20 unofficially for Matata. very tight for the minor places. I think Dida getting second place ahead of Lazoy. Was Lazoy second?
I think Lazoy did just hold on. Dida was chasing hard, and Lazoy certainly paying the price for trying to hold on as long as he did to Matata ahead of him, but very close on the line for second and third.
It's a tough way to run those sort of times, way below 60 minutes. And look at the clock. Many men getting through the 61-hour barrier here this morning, and more or less perfect conditions in Ras Al Khaimah. The hour mark comes up now, and I think we've got about 9 or 10 home already, waiting for that confirmation of the winning time from Matata. 59.20 it was indeed, is confirmed. Dida second, 59.25. He did just beat Lazoy. And Debele, both of them on 59.25. And Debele fourth with 59.28. I mean, the finishing times, Paula, make you feel as though it was one that got away. You know, they've run a long way under 60 minutes, and yet the first, what, 2/3 of the race was desperately slow by the standards of these men.
I think when you see finishing times like that, you have to think the only man who's really happy with his race out there is Matata, because he's come away with it with a personal best, and he ended up running the race that suited him the best, and the others kind of got sucked into a little bit of watching each other over that first almost 15 kilometres of this race before the race really got going out there.
Well, here we can have a quick chat with the winner of the race, Alex Matata.
Congratulations on the win today. It was quite slow to start with. How did you feel out there?
Okay, according to my body, according to this place, it was not so much nice for first 10 kilometers. It was tough for me, and I just pushed one eye light at 15, 16K. Now I start feeling my body can numb off.
There were no pacemakers today. Was it better having just a race with your fellow runners, or did you miss having a pacemaker pushing the pace?
Yeah, in fact, I miss pacemakers because it was not easy. It was not easy to push. There was a lot of windy, and the course was not so much good. So what I can say about, if we had pacemaker, if I could have pacemaker, I couldn't do better, more better. But I'm happy because I proved my PB.
Did it feel cold out there? You had your gloves on for a bit.
Sorry?
Did you feel cold out there? Was it chilly this morning?
Okay. This morning it was very much cold. I couldn't imagine the way it was. It was very cold.
Well, congratulations on the win.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Wendy Sly, Olympic silver medalist there, interviewing the winner, Alex Matata. His final kilometre, by the 21st kilometre, was at 2:39, that's sub-13:20 pace. Back to this women's race, though, Paula, where Taye has dominated with a very aggressive first half, but has she slowed significantly?
And is she in danger of being caught by Judy Kemboy, who was chasing hard behind her a couple of kilometres ago? Just looking at the splits in the women's race, I'm wondering if there is some wind out there on the island. Indeed, confirmation that that gap is not closing back to Kemboy, so Taye has the race wrapped up. But some yo-yoing from 16 and 17 kilometres around that 3:18:19 pace. She did pick it up and rally back down to 3:14 pace per kilometre, and now that 20th kilometre slowed again, perhaps indicating she's working hard into the wind. So course record, I'm afraid, has gone at this point, personal best as well, and Taye is now trying to hold on for the win. Judy Kemboy looks as though she's settled into that rhythm. Second place is safe for her. She can still work towards trying to battle perhaps for a personal best, although I'm sure that might be difficult out there. Also, her personal best stands at 65.43.
Well, the first 10K, Taye covered in 30.06. The second 10K to 20K, 32.12. I mean, that is a ridiculous differential. 32.12 for that second 10K. over 2 minutes slower than the first 10K, and that tells the story. She overcommitted. She went out very aggressively, very bravely, but maybe threw caution to the wind a little bit too much, as we see Judy Kemboy here chasing hard, but it's been a lonely chase for her, Paula. You could argue not an even playing field when Taya's had a pacemaker the whole race.
Exactly, although you could also argue that that pacemaker in there may have been why Taya went too fast in the beginning, so it's not ended up actually doing her any favours time-wise, although I would argue has helped her to build up the buffer that she has and to enable victory in this race. You wonder what might happen if the women were just allowed to race together and see what they could produce time-wise and race-wise as well, in terms of from a spectator point of view.
Yeah, I think attention to pacemaking will be given in the reassessment of today's unfolding 18th Ras Al Khaimah half marathons. Here's Taye approaching the finish line. It's been a really solid run from her. The course record 64.14 by Gebrezer 3 years ago remains safe. That was her debut. Taye here, far more experience. Her best 64.14 as well. It has been a strong run from her, ultimately one that has probably ended in disappointment for her in some respects, but she is going to be the winner of this 18th edition of the Ras Al Khaimah half marathon. There's no doubt about that. Taye has dominated this race. It's really been a case of her against the clock, and it has been still a very, very solid run. Under 66 minutes, as you can see. She approaches the line here. Ejgehu Taye Hailu wins here in Ras Al Khaimah. 65.52 unofficially there. And that means that it is the fastest time in the world this year for Taye, despite those bizarre splits. Over 2 minutes difference between her first 10K and her second 10K. Judy Kemboy coming home for second place. She's chased really hard. She was 44 seconds down at 15K, a great deal less than that as she crosses the line in the background. There she is, Kemboy. She's going to come home. Remember, Taye's time, 65.52 unofficially. Kemboy here has worked so hard for this second spot. Crosses the line there in, 66.33 unofficially. So about 40 seconds down. She closed a little bit. Chalanga looks like she's going to finish in third place. She too working hard. Across the line there in the background. Now in 66.53. So still super fast times here. And Zerai in fourth place, 67.05 unofficially. Once again, Ras Al Khaimah has delivered in terms of really big numbers, running super fast times. Paula, maybe we were anticipating records too much this morning, you know, with all the hype that went on, and to an extent it was the athletes themselves who said they would chase records this morning, so we were led by them.
Yes, and then I think perhaps they revised that once they got out there and saw what the racing conditions were like. And in Taya's case, I think she went out certainly with a plan, and on that plan, didn't she, but paid for it substantially on the second half of that race.
Dane Anmore Mengesha, the 21-year-old, best of 67.47. She crosses the line there. Only, what, about some 15 seconds outside her lifetime best. Many of these athletes, of course, have run the race on their own. Hailu and Lolio. Lolio there, who's a 67.08 performer, about a minute down on her lifetime best. She only ran half marathons last year, 6 of them though. 4 of them were in 67-minute territory this morning, just outside 68 minutes. And Afanigas coming home as well. Belelihem Afanigas Yema ran 7 half marathons in 2023, maybe too many. There's a best of 66.46, but she's a couple of minutes outside that this morning as she finishes very shortly. There's Jet Correa. Brilliant Jep Correa. She too a little way outside her best. Interesting, wasn't it, Paula, to hear the men's race winner So Matata saying that he thought it was windy out there.
Yeah, no,
No indication of that.
there wasn't. I mean, some of the palm trees are moving a little bit. I think we do know from running around the island, you can feel the breeze out there a little bit, can't you? And it seems quite nice when it's at your back, but when it's in the front, then it's not that conducive to racing quickly. But as we said, looking at the pack, it didn't indicate that there was a wind because they were spread out across the road.
Well, we can take a look now at the climax of that men's race here in Ras Al Khaimah. Matata, who did so much of the aggressive running in the closing stages, taking victory, a well-earned victory this morning from the man who was not fancied for the win, but he ran a personal best by some 17 seconds this morning. 59.20 is winning time for the 26-year-old Kenyan. And behind him in second place, Isaiah Lazoy, the fastest man in the field when the gun set them underway. Confirmation then of that win for Matata. Kenyans and Ethiopians sharing honours alternately there in the first few places. Matata 59.25 seconds to the good ahead of Dida Lazoy, there 59.26, 1 second down in third place. He was very tight, and 59.28 by Debele in fourth place, just off the rostrum. But the time is a clear indication of what a tactical race we had this morning here in Ras Al Khaimah with just some 15 seconds covering the first 5 men. Good to see, though, the first 9 getting under 60 minutes.
Yeah, and a great race, as we said, so perhaps not the fast times that the organisers might have liked out here, but a very, very exciting race to watch.
Akko making the top 10 there for Tanzania with 60.28. And for Akko, according to my stats, that is perhaps the biggest personal best of the day. His previous best 65.41 I had, so he's improved by over 5 minutes. Mau Akko of Tanzania there in 10th place. But do you know what? I always like to see athletes who take a race by the scruff of the neck and lead and do a lot of the work, come home and get their reward and the win, and that's what Matata got this morning. He really worked for that.
He did. He had to work for a long, long time, turning the screw, and finally rewarded when that daylight started to break open behind him and pushed on for the time as well. And in contrast to that, Taya, out on her own for pretty much all of that race, went out very, very quickly and had to hold on and work extremely hard in that closing 10 kilometres or so, but she did that and rewarded with victory and the leading time this year so far.
The huge contrast between her opening 10k and her second 10k, the split for her. I wonder if you could extrapolate from that how much time she lost by going out so hard. Here is the winner, the Taye, from the women's race.
And you were on for a course record. How did you feel?
እጅጋየሁ እንኳን ደስ ያለሽ 5 ኪሎ ሜትር ላይ የራስሽን ፈጣን ሰዓት ላይ ነበርሽው ምን ተሰማሽ?
አሪፍ ነው። ፈጣን ነበርኩ ግን ከ10 ኪሎ ሜትር በኋላ ነው ትንሽ ንፋሱ ከብዶብኝ መሄድ እኮ ነው ያቃተኝ እንጂ የተሻለ ሰዓት ሮጣለሁ ብዬ አስቤ ነበር ግን አልተሳካም።
She said she was really good in shape, but after 10 kilometers there the wind is like pushing her back, so that's why she didn't do it as planned, but it's okay.
And what happened at the drink station? You looked like you were searching for your bottle.
እዛ ውሃ የወደቀብሽ ጊዜ ምን ሆኖ ነው የምትልሽ?
እሱ እኮ የኔ መስሎኝ እኮ ነው እኮ የልጁን ለካ ወሰደ እኔ እንዳታናሳስል እኮ የኔ አንስቶ የሚሰጥ መስሎኝ ተው እንዳታናስል ለካ ሲያይ የሌላ ሰው ነው መልሼ ነው እዛን የኔ ራሴ መስሎኝ እኮ እንጂ እኔ መስሎኝ ነው ተናናሳው እንጂ
ግን ያንቺ አይደለም
መልሻለሁ ዘላም
She said she thought that bottle belonged to her, but she noticed that's not her, so that's why she tried to return back. That's what she did.
You recovered well from that. Are you happy with your run today?
አሁን ከጨረሽ በኋላ ደስተኛ ነሽ ወይ ከድካሙ በኋላ?
አዎ ደስተኛ ነኝ። ፈጣሪ ይመስገን በጣም ደስ ብሎኛል።
I'm very happy, thanks to God. That's what she said.
Congratulations on the win, and I'm sure there are many faster times to come.
እንኳን ደስ ያለሽ ገና ብዙ ፈጣን ሩጫ ትሮጫለሽ ወደፊት።
አመሰግናለሁ።
Thank you.
Well, she looks philosophical, I suppose you could say, Paula, the winner of the women's race there. Ejike Hutaye, the winner in 65.52 this morning. Very comfortable victory, but it's a case of what might have been, I think, although just like the men's winner, she referred to interview ahead of Kemboy and Chalangat, she said, referred to the wind being a factor.
Yeah, I think certainly she talked about the wind in the last 10K, didn't she, which makes a little bit more sense, because certainly when the men were running slower, it was the beginning part of the race and there didn't look to be too much wind. Then you do have to wonder what Ejike Hutaye can run if she runs a little bit more even paced in the future. You certainly think that personal best 64.14 could come under some revision.
Well, records will come in Ras Al Khaimah, but today was not the day for them. This 18th edition has produced brilliant racing in the men's race, an outstanding dominant run from Taye in the women's race ahead of Kemboy, who chased hard, finished 42 seconds down eventually. Jessica Chalangat makes the rostrum as well with 66.53. Not so many personal bests because of the nature of the racing this morning. Two contrasting races. But Paula, your final thoughts on what we've seen here in Ras Al Khaimah?
I think we've seen some exciting racing to watch rather than looking at racing on the clock, and I think, as you mentioned earlier, it was nice to see Matata rewarded for the hard work that he put in. He certainly worked hard for that victory today and personal best.
Well, it has been a great day's racing in Ras Al Khaimah. It's not even 8 in the morning here in the United Arab Emirates, but the sun is beaming down, the temperatures will rise, and the athletes will head back and recover. It's been a fabulous couple of elite races here. Do hope you've enjoyed it with myself, Tim Hutchins, and Paula Radcliffe, and the production team as well for being with us. We'll see you again. Bye-bye for now from all of us in Ras Al Khaimah.
Goodbye.
All those areas as well into the mountains. That's the road here in the nature emerald.